The text arrived at 9:47 a.m. One line, no name, no punctuation. Floor 42. They're already inside. Jaewon read it twice. An unknown number, no record in his contacts, no match in his call history. He ran a quiet scan of the morning in his mind. His security team, his legal counsel, his assistant. None of them would send something like this. None of them communicated in fragments. None of them would forget to sign a message to him. He slid the phone back into his breast pocket. He didn't know what it meant. He didn't know who sent it. What he knew, and this was the thing that settled into the base of his chest like something cold and patient, was that someone out there knew exactly where he was, which building, which tower, which elevator car, and had chosen to tell him so with 43 seconds to spare. Not enough time to do anything. Exactly enough time to feel it. The Century Tower elevator was engineered for silence. Tempered glass walls, brushed steel paneling, a floor so clean it reflected the city outside like a second sky. 42 stories of Seattle pressed against the glass rain-dark buildings, the smear of headlights, the harbor somewhere beyond it all, swallowed by gray. Jaewon stood with his hands clasped behind his back. His posture was the posture of a man who had been taught, from the age of 7, that stillness was power. His suit was charcoal. His tie was black. He looked, as he always looked, like a theorem precise, cold, and without excess. Beside him, Seo-yeon checked her reflection in the steel panel. She was not looking for flaws. She was looking for vulnerabilities, the kind you seal before anyone else can find them. Her dress caught the light and held it. Gold sequins against the monochrome interior, the only warm color in the car. Above them, the floor numbers climbed. 38, 39, 40. On the 90th floor, the Hanjin-Wan board was assembled. The merger documents already laid out 3 companies, 4 countries, a combined asset portfolio that would make the Wan name untouchable for the next 2 generations. Jaewon had spent 4 months fighting a ghost legal team to get here. Today, it ended. The elevator stopped. The doors slid open. 2 girls stepped in. They were identical, not in the way you recognize twins from across a room, but in the way you feel them before you see them. A doubling of presence that makes the air behave differently. They wore Navy school uniforms with white collars gone slightly damp at the edges. Their hair was braided, tied with red ribbons, both ribbons fractionally crooked, as though tied by the same hands in the same hurry. Their boots were rubber and bright yellow, and they were leaving faint, wet prints on the floor. They smelled of the pier. Salt and cedar and rain-soaked timber. They did not press a button. They did not look at the panel. They looked at Jaewon. The smaller of the 2, by perhaps a centimeter, no more extended her hand slowly and pressed it flat against the wool of his trouser leg. Unhesitating. Warm. "Daddy," she said. "It's you." Not a question. Not a hope. A statement of fact. Delivered with the calm certainty of a child who has been carrying something heavy for a very long time and has simply arrived, at last, at the place where she can put it down. Jaewon did not move. He looked down, and his own eyes looked back at him. Not similar to his eyes, not the coincidence of shared features between strangers, the exact architecture of them, the weight of the lid, the particular stillness of the iris, as though someone had reached into his face 8 years ago and kept what they found there. Beside him, the second twin had gone still. She was not looking at him. She was looking at Seo-yeon carefully, with the focused attention of a child performing a task she has rehearsed. Her hand moved to her raincoat pocket and came out holding 2 things at once: a small photograph, creased at the corners, and a thick ivory envelope. She glanced down at the photograph, then back up at Seo-yeon, confirming. The envelope had something tucked beneath its sealed flap, a piece of cardstock, pushed in so the top edge was visible, facing outward, crayon on white, 4 figures holding hands beneath a yellow sun, the tallest one in a gray suit. Beneath them, in the careful block letters of a child who had recently learned to write, "Our family." The twin held the envelope out toward Seo-yeon with the straightforward courtesy of someone completing a delivery. "Mama said to give this to you," she said. "If you were mean." The silence in the elevator changed. Same engineered quiet, same insulated air, but something had shifted inside it, some assumption about how the next hour was supposed to go. Seo-yeon did not take the envelope immediately. She looked at the drawing tucked into its edge. Then she looked at Jaewon the way she looked at everything, measuring the distance between what she was seeing and what it was going to cost her. She took the envelope. She did not open it. Not yet. Have you ever stood somewhere, an elevator, a boardroom, a life you built piece by piece and understood in a single breath that the ground was not ground? That what you believed was a foundation was a surface, and something had been moving silently beneath it for a very long time. waiting for exactly this moment to come up for air. Jaewon built things. That was his inheritance and his identity, and the only language he had ever been fully fluent in. He built companies, alliances, and reputations. He read rooms the way other men read, whether fast, completely, with his own safety always accounted for. He had walked into boardrooms where 3 men wanted him professionally destroyed and walked out with their signatures still wet. He had never, in 41 years, stood in a room where he could not find the exit. He could not find it now. If you're already feeling the pull of this story, the kind that wraps around your chest and doesn't let go, subscribe to Velvet Noir. We tell the stories that leave marks. Stay with us. The doors opened on floor 90. Camera flashes. Board members. A room full of people who had crossed 4 time zones to watch Jaewon sign his name and make everything permanent. A paralegal appeared at the threshold, young, lanyard swinging, the specific expression of someone who had turned their back for 60 seconds and aged a decade for it. She looked at the twins with a relief so intense it bordered on grief. "I'm so sorry they were right beside me. I only turned around for a moment." Jaewon raised one hand. Not unkindly. She stopped. Seo-yun stepped close enough that her voice reached only him. She still hadn't opened the envelope. It was in her hand at her side, pressed flat against her dress, the crayon drawing facing inward, now hidden. "Walk out there," she said, quiet as a blade finding its angle. "They are waiting." He looked at the girl whose hand was still warm against his leg. He looked at the smaller one, his own eyes in a face that had been alive in the world for 7 years without him knowing it. He looked at the word the crayon had made beneath those 4 holding figures. "Our family." He reached out and pressed the button marked L. Not asking, not explaining. He pressed it and held the smaller twin's gaze while he did a quiet, deliberate look that said, "I know, and I'm coming," without either word crossing his lips. The elevator began to fall. The board waited on floor 90. The merger documents sat unsigned. The cameras would run out of patience in approximately 4 minutes. None of it moved in him the way it should have. His hand found his phone, the unknown number still on the screen. Floor 42, they're already inside. He stared at it as the elevator dropped through the building. Not his team, they didn't know. Not an accident, the message was clean, the timing exact, the number unregistered and untrackable. Whoever sent this had known his schedule, his building, and what was waiting behind those doors before he did. They hadn't warned him so he could prepare. They had told him because they wanted him to feel it first, to stand inside those 43 seconds, with the knowledge that someone else was already in control of this morning. That the 4-month legal war he had been fighting against a faceless opposition, the ghost team filing injunctions from a shielded address he had never been able to locate, all of it had just changed shape. This was not a coincidence. This was a move. The elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened onto the marble and rain light of the Century Tower atrium. The girls looked up at him. He pocketed the phone and stepped out with them into the marble and gray light of the atrium, into a morning that no longer belonged to him the way it had 43 seconds ago. Outside, through the tower's glass walls, Seattle was still raining. The harbor lay somewhere beyond the buildings, cold, dark, and patient. Someone had been watching him for a very long time. And upstairs, in Seo-yun's hand, the envelope was still sealed. The board had been waiting 14 minutes when Jaewon's assistant appeared in the conference room doorway alone and told them, in a carefully calibrated voice, that Mr. Won had been detained by a family matter. The room absorbed this in the particular silence of powerful people who are too disciplined to say what they are thinking. Downstairs, Jaewon stood in the lobby atrium with 2 girls in yellow boots and tried to locate the feeling moving through him. Not panic, he had trained that out of himself at 23 during an acquisition that nearly cost him everything. This was older than panic. Quieter. Something that had been dormant for 8 years and was now, without his permission, awake. So-yun came through the lobby doors with the velocity of a woman whose control has slipped and who intends to recover it by force. She had opened the envelope. She had read every word inside. The crayon drawing was pressed against her clutch, facing inward, hidden. She stopped 3 feet from him. "It's a morality clause notice," she said. Her voice was level, which was worse than if it had shaken. "Filed at 8:52 this morning." She let that land. "Before we stepped into that elevator, Jaewon, the conduct it cites isn't from today. It's documented from 8 years ago, a $50,000 bank draft sent to a woman you had been involved with. Time to your departure from Seattle. Recorded as a payment to remove a personal entanglement prior to your succession." A pause. The clause in the merger agreement prohibits any principal officer from conduct demonstrating moral turpitude. Her legal team has spent 2 years building the evidentiary record. Today, in front of those cameras on floor 90, It goes public. Jae-won was still. He knew the texture of Seo-yeon's threats, the measured delivery, the precision of her language when the stakes were real. He felt this one land without flinching, because a man who has been bracing for an impact he doesn't know is coming cannot brace correctly. "Walk upstairs," she said. "Issue the statement. Call the children of fabrication. We contain this." The smaller twin had moved to stand beside him, not holding his hand. Simply close the way a child stands near something it has decided is worth standing near. Jae-won looked at the girl. He looked at the exact shape of his own eyes in her face. He looked at 8 years of a decision he had made with a pen and a bank draft, and what it had cost someone while he was building his empire on her silence. "No," he said. Seo-yeon's expression did not break. It recalibrated a small, precise shift, the way a calculation adjusts when a variable reveals itself to be different than assumed. "If you don't," she said quietly, "my family will ensure those children are declared unfit. State custody by midnight." "Try," he said, "and watch me hold the press conference that ends your family's political credibility before morning." He looked at her for a long moment, not with anger, but with the specific clarity of a man who has finally understood what he is willing to lose, and found the list shorter than expected. "Who is the mother?" Seo-yeon said. "I'm going to find out," he replied. She turned and walked to the elevators without looking back. Seo-yeon did not go to Hong Kong that day. She went upstairs. While Jae-won stood in the lobby atrium with 2 children in yellow boots trying to locate the feeling moving through him, Seo-yeon rode the elevator back to the 90th floor and walked into the boardroom with the composure of a woman who had anticipated this exact morning and prepared for it 3 months in advance. She sat down. She ordered tea. She opened the envelope not to read it again, but to place it face up at the center of the conference table, so that every board member in the room could see the crayon drawing before she said a single word. She let them look at it for 15 seconds. Then she spoke. What she said precisely, methodically, without raising her voice, once took 11 minutes. She outlined the morality clause filing in full. She presented documentation she had obtained independently of D.L. Green's legal team. Her own family's investigators had been running a parallel file on Jae-won for 16 months, ever since certain irregularities in his personal accounts had suggested a liability she needed to price before committing her family's name to his. She had known about the bank draft longer than he had known she knew. She had simply been deciding whether the information was more useful, as leverage, or as an exit. He had made that decision for her. She proposed an emergency restructure. The merger could be preserved not under Jae-won's name, not with Jae-won's signature, but with his voting shares transferred under a duress clause to the family trust, which she would co-administer as his now former fiancé and principal creditor. The language had already been drafted. It required only the board's agreement and Jae-won's absence to proceed. The board agreed in 40 minutes. Powerful men, Jae-won had always known, do not mourn individuals. They mourn instability. Offer them stability in the same meeting and they will take it without ceremony. By the time his car was crossing the bridge toward the South Pier, his access to the Won family's primary accounts had been suspended. Not frozen, suspended, which was more elegant and, legally, more difficult to contest. His father's attorneys had moved fast from Seoul. Seo-yeon's family had moved faster from Seattle. The restructure was filed before noon. He did not know any of this yet. He was driving through the rain, looking at a permit number on his phone screen, remembering a warehouse. He would find out at 2:14 that afternoon, when 3 separate alerts arrived simultaneously on his phone: his financial advisor, his private attorney, his bank. And then the calls stopped, because shortly after 2:14 his phone went into a bucket of industrial solvent. And that was the end of what Jae-won knew about the state of his own finances for the next 72 hours. Later, much later, in the specific aftermath of a man sitting in a warehouse kitchen, eating slightly burned eggs, and understanding the full shape of what he had walked into, he would understand what Seo-yeon had done and feel something that was not quite anger and not quite admiration, but occupied the narrow space between them where you keep your respect for the precision of people who never needed you the way you assumed. She had not left. She had won. And the difference between those two things was the most expensive lesson Jae-won had ever paid for. He drove himself. His assistant called twice. He sent both to voicemail and kept his eyes on the rain-slicked road. The girls were quiet in the back seat, in the way of children who have learned, through long practice, that adults sometimes need silence before they become accessible. Lily watched the city move past the window with the focused patience of a child accustomed to waiting. Mara drew in a small notebook with the committed grip of someone who takes the work seriously. Neither spoke. Neither fidgeted. 7 years old and already patient in a way that told him everything he needed to know about the woman who had raised them. What she valued, what she had required of herself, what she had given them instead of bitterness. He drove and thought. D. L. Green, lead counsel of Green Legal Group, a shielded firm. He had spent 4 months and 3 separate investigation contracts trying to identify. Every firm came back empty. The registered address in the legal filings traced to a shell LLC with no visible footprint, no listed officers, no physical signage, no digital presence. Just a permit number embedded deep in the incorporation documents, which his investigators had cross-referenced against commercial property databases and found no match. A bureaucratic dead end. They had filed their reports, cashed their fees, and closed the matter. He pulled up the filing at a red light. The permit number, his investigators had come at it through databases. Jaewon came at it from memory, from the specific, involuntary way the mind stores the things it has decided to stop examining. He did not find the building in a database. He recognized it. That permit number corresponded to a waterfront warehouse on the South Pier that he had stood inside when it was raw and unfinished, smelling of salt water and old timber, and the particular quality of silence that settles between two people who have run out of reasons to keep their distance. He sat at the green light until the car behind him tapped its horn. 8 years ago, he had spent 3 weeks in Seattle before the succession called him back to Seoul. 3 weeks he had allowed himself, once, to think of as the last time he had been a person rather than a position. A woman who could argue contract law and Toni Morrison in the same conversation and make both feel urgent. A warmth he had mistaken for a beginning when it was, for her, already an ending she had not been consulted about. He had left a bank draft, $50,000. The clean, efficient assumption of a man who believed that money, deployed with sufficient generosity, could substitute for decency. It was the assumption of someone who had never been on the receiving end of it. He understood now with the particular certainty of a stone finding the bottom of still water that it had not substituted for anything, that she had taken his transaction and built a decade of surgical precision from its ash. In the rearview mirror, Lily was still watching the city drift past. Mara was still drawing. His own eyes in both their faces, looking out at a world they had been navigating for 7 years, while he built his empire and told himself the story of a man without loose ends. He put the car in drive. He went to the warehouse. The building had been beautiful, in the way industrial things are beautiful, honest about its function, indifferent to approval. Someone had restored it without softening it. The brick was clean but not sanitized. The windows were large and factory-framed, pouring gray harbor light across the raw concrete floor in long rectangles. Oil paint lived in the walls like a second history. Jaewon stood in the entrance and understood that this was not a place constructed from grief. The woman who built this had built it from somewhere harder and more durable than grief. She was at the far end of the room. Demetra Green stood beside a work table covered in legal briefs and 3 large canvases at various stages of completion oil, not crayon, sweeping and deliberate and nothing like her daughter's drawings, and yet somehow related to them. She wore a suit the color of deep forest. Her hair was cropped short and sharp. She looked like a woman who had made a decision, years ago, about who she intended to be, and had not needed to revisit it. She did not look up when he entered. "The building's legal," she said. "Before you start, I wasn't going to say that. You walk in and assess before you speak. 8 years and that hasn't changed." He moved into the room. The girls had stayed in the car. He had asked them to give him a few minutes, and they had accepted this with the patience of children who understood the weight of adult conversations without needing to hear them. "The bank draft," he said. "You didn't cash it." "No. Where is it?" "I burned it." She set down the document she was holding and looked at him directly for the first time. Her eyes were unchanged, the same quality of seeing he had carried in some unlabeled compartment of his memory for 8 years. Direct, measuring, willing to look at the actual thing rather than the comfortable version. "I used the heat to stay warm the night. I decided to study for the bar exam instead. That's a metaphor, but it is also literally true." "The text message," he said, "this morning. Floor 42. They're already inside. That was you." A pause that confirmed it before she spoke. "When the paralegal told me they'd slipped away, I sent it. Not to warn you." She looked at him steadily. "I wanted you to spend 43 seconds knowing someone had eyes on you, to feel observed before the claws hit, to walk into that elevator already unsettled." She paused. "I didn't plan for them to find you. That wasn't the plan. What happened? They slipped away during a deposition break. By the time I knew, the elevator doors had already opened. Something moved in her expression, brief, controlled, a depth she managed before it surfaced fully. I planned the merger's collapse for 2 years. I planned the clause filing. I planned the press on floor 90. I did not plan my daughters pressing their hands against a stranger's trouser leg and saying your name. The harbor light fell across the floor between them. They weren't frightened, he said. No, she said quietly. They weren't. He stood with that for a long moment, in the silence of a room that had been built by someone who had learned to make something permanent out of what he discarded. The afternoon moved through the warehouse in long, unhurried degrees. The kind of light that makes everything feel more consequential than usual. Jae-won had not left. He sat on a wooden stool at the edge of the work table with his jacket off and watched Dimitra work. She did not adjust her behavior for his presence, answered messages, annotated briefs, made notes in the margins with a pen she held in the same overhand grip Mara used in the back seat. He noticed this and said nothing about it. Seo-yun threatened the girls, he said. State custody by midnight. Dimitra looked up, not alarmed, assessed. The response to that threat was filed 4 months ago, she said. Her family's political reach ends at the county line. I have 90 pages of documentation that establishes that clearly. She closed the laptop. I've been 3 moves ahead of everyone in this situation for 2 years. That includes you. Then tell me the rest of it, he said. All of it. She considered him the way a surgeon considers a patient, not unkindly, but with the specific honesty of someone who has decided that false comfort is its own form of damage. The morality clause filing is based on the bank draft, she said. Documented payment made 8 years ago to a woman carrying your children, timed precisely to your exit from her life. Under the merger agreement's personal conduct provisions, that constitutes conduct unbecoming of a principal officer. She held his gaze. That case was already built, already filed. Today was always going to happen regardless of whether your daughters found you in an elevator. Then what did today change? She moved to the window not to look at him, but at the harbor, which had gone the color of old pewter. She spoke to the glass. Today made it public. Your presence on floor 90 with those cameras, and then your departure created the public record that removes any possibility of a private settlement. You couldn't quietly sign your way out of this, after those cameras saw you leave. She paused, and said the next part carefully. What today also did, which I did not plan and cannot take credit for, is answer a question I had about your character, whether you would deny them or not. That question matters to me for reasons that have nothing to do with the merger. He was quiet for a moment. And if I had denied them? She looked at him with the directness that had not changed in 8 years. Then the legal outcome would have been identical, she said. But I would have known what I needed to know about you, and this conversation would not be happening. Outside, the harbor had gone the color of pewter in the falling afternoon. On the windowsill, the light pooled and thinned. He looked at her profile, the sharp jaw, the set of shoulders that said, I have held every piece of this together without assistance, and I have not dropped a single one. She had taken the door he closed on her and turned it into a wall. And then she had taken the wall apart, brick by brick, and used every piece to build something that could outlast him. What do you want? He asked. Not the legal answer, the real one. She turned from the window, studied him with those measuring eyes for a long time. Ask me that again in a year, she said, when the answer won't be contaminated by today. The phone rang at 6:47. The screen read Father Soul. Jae-won looked at it for one measured breath. Then he answered. His father's voice arrived crisp and cold from 6,000 miles away, carrying the complete authority of a man who had never, in 72 years, occupied a room where he was not the apex. He spoke in Korean, a courtesy only in the sense that it excluded anyone present who could not follow. His instructions were precise and sequenced. Return to the 90th floor immediately. Issue a formal statement to the assembled press. Characterize the morning as a coordinated defamation attempt by a disgruntled former employee of a subsidiary firm. And the children here, his father's voice, carried the tone of someone selecting the correct instrument for a delicate task, were to be described as a fabrication. Jae-won listened without interrupting. He had been conditioned, from the age of 7, to let his father complete his thoughts before responding. The way you let a blade stop moving before you reach for it. When the silence arrived, that expected compliance, Dimitra stepped forward and took the phone from his hand. She did not ask. She did not wait to be offered it. She simply took it with the purposefulness of a woman who has decided a particular conversation belongs to her by right and held it to her ear. Chairman Won, she said, in English, unhurried, precise. My name is D. L. Green. I'm lead counsel of Green Legal Group, The firm that has been systematically dismantling your merger for the last 4 months. A pause, calibrated not for drama but for comprehension. I understand you intend to characterize my daughters as a fabrication. I want to make sure you have complete information before you proceed with that. A shorter pause. The girls are registered under my legal alias with no father listed on either birth certificate. That was completed 3 years ago through sealed proceedings, prior to any paternity action. You have no parental rights, no legal standing, and no political leverage over children who do not, on paper, exist in connection to your family in any form. Her voice did not change register once, not cold, not heated, simply exact, the way a well-constructed legal argument is simply exact. Your threats are noise, Chairman. Expensive, well-tailored noise, but noise. She extended the phone to Jae-won without looking at him. He's still on the line. Jae-won took it. His father was silent in the way of men confronting a variable they failed to account for. 4 seconds. Then the line went dead. He stood holding the phone. Outside, footsteps on the exterior stairs, the girls, done waiting, negotiating their way inside. The door opened. Lily appeared first. Yellow boots, rabbit by one ear. Mara followed, notebook under her arm. They performed the rapid, practiced assessment of children entering a space where adult things have been happening. Apparently satisfied, Lily crossed to her mother and leaned against her side without announcement or ceremony. Mara looked at Jae-won. Are you staying? Direct. No weight attached, only information she had determined she needed. He set the phone face down on the work table. For a while, he said. Mara considered this with the gravity she applied to everything that mattered. Then she opened her notebook and went back to drawing. Mara had found the solvent bucket earlier, a wide metal pail near the industrial shelving, half filled with turpentine solution. She hadn't touched it, she'd simply located it and moved on, the way she catalogued every new space she entered. At 7:15, Jae-won's phone rang again. Not his father. His father's personal attorney, the kind of call that means the problem has been reclassified as something requiring professionals rather than family. A settlement offer would follow. A number designed to make a man reconsider his principles. He looked at the phone. He looked at the bucket. He thought about his father's voice saying fabrication with the ease of a man who had deployed the word before. He thought about the merger documents on the 90th floor, and the watch ticking all morning like a metronome toward a version of himself he had almost let become permanent. He thought about a child's hand pressing against his trouser leg without hesitation, without strategy, without a single thing to gain. He dropped the phone into the bucket. The solvent took it with a quiet, decisive hiss. Not dramatic, not cinematic. The sound of something ending without ceremony, which was, he had recently started to understand, how most important things actually end. Demetra watched without moving. The merger was already dead before you did that, she said. I filed the final injunction at 9:31 this morning. Your elevator reached floor 42 at 9:49. She held his gaze. The war ended before you even knew you were in it. You didn't need to do that. I know, he said. Then why? Because it was never about the merger. He turned from the bucket. It was about whether I was still capable of being the kind of man who would. I needed to know that about myself. He looked at her directly. I also needed you to know it. The warehouse held the silence between them, the particular silence of two people who have arrived, through entirely different routes, at the same unlit room, and are deciding independently whether to find the switch. The girls were asleep in the back office. Demetra had settled them 40 minutes ago with a practiced efficiency that contained, inside it, something that was not efficiency at all. You think one gesture repairs 8 years, she said, not an accusation. A test with a specific answer she was listening for. No, he said. I think one gesture starts the accounting. I know what the balance looks like. I'm not asking you to pretend it doesn't. She studied him for a long time, looking for the angle, the version of sincerity that was actually performance. He understood why she was looking, and he did not hurry her. Whatever she found or chose to believe she found made her look away first. The girls will ask hard questions, she said. About where you've been. About why. I'll answer them. Truthfully. All of it. She moved toward the back room, paused in the doorway without turning. The couch pulls out, she said. Blankets in the cabinet. The girls are up before 6. She went inside. Jae-won stood in the empty warehouse, with a dissolved phone in the corner, and the harbor pressing its cold patience against the windows, and felt, for the first time in longer than he could honestly measure, that he was standing in exactly the right place. The harbor made a sound at night he hadn't expected. Not the romantic lap of water against wood, but something deeper, a low structural pressure against the building's foundation, like the city itself breathing. He had slept anyway. Completely, without the fractured vigilance that had followed him for as long as he could remember. He woke at 5:47 to gray light through the tall windows, and two small faces 4 inches from his own. Lily was holding her rabbit. Mara had her notebook open, already drawing. They had not woken him. They had simply positioned themselves at close range and waited, with the patience of children who know the world operates on its own schedule. He looked at them. They looked at him. "You snore," Lily said. "Informational. Not unkind. Only a little," Mara added, in the interest of accuracy. He sat up, the kind of slow that belongs to a man taking stock of where he is and how he arrived there. His watch, which he had worn every day for 11 years, was on the floor where it had slid in the night. He left it there. "Are you hungry?" he asked. "Yes," Lily said immediately. "I could eat," Mara said, which he was already learning meant exactly the same thing, delivered with editorial distance. The kitchen was small and precise, organized with the efficiency of someone who has run a household alone for 7 years and removed every redundancy. He found eggs, bread, a pan. He had not cooked in longer than he could accurately calculate his sole apartment. Had a kitchen he used to store documents, but eggs were eggs. He broke 4 into the pan. He burned the first 2 slightly. He plated them anyway and set them on the small table by the window where harbor light came in at a low angle, making ordinary things look deliberate. The girls sat. Lily ate immediately. Mara looked at her plate, then at him. "Where did you live before?" Mara asked. "Seoul mostly, sometimes Seattle. Did you know about us?" He set down his fork. He had promised Dimitra he would answer hard questions truthfully. He meant it now, sitting in a kitchen that wasn't his, facing a 7-year-old with his own eyes, understanding that the truth was the only thing he had to offer. "No," he said. "I didn't know about you, but I should have. I left in a way that made it easy not to know, and that was a choice I made, and it was the wrong one." Mara looked at him for a long moment. "Okay," she said, and picked up her fork. Lily had already finished. She was drawing on a paper napkin, a small figure in a gray suit at a stove, slightly lopsided, smoke rising from the pan. He looked at it. He said nothing. He filed it in the part of his memory he intended, this time, to keep. Dimitra appeared in the doorway at 6:23, dressed for work. She stopped when she saw the table, the plates, the used pan, the napkin drawing, the 3 of them in the gray morning light. She poured coffee from the pot he had figured out on the second attempt. "The eggs were burned," Lily offered. "A little," Mara confirmed. "They were fine," Jaewon said. Dimitra drank her coffee facing the window. Her shoulders, he noticed, had dropped approximately half an inch from where she normally carried them. It was the smallest possible thing. It was not small at all. The Wan Building's 90th floor had been his in the specific way that things are yours when you have spent 4 years making them inevitable. The view, the conference table, the particular silence of a room designed to make people feel the weight of whoever sits at its head. He arrived at 7 in the morning, before the building filled. His access card still worked. That would be revoked by end of day, he knew, but no one had thought to do it yet. The board was efficient in many things. Paperwork after a public collapse moved more slowly. The office held less than he expected. He had always traveled light philosophically. He knew men who decorated their offices like personal museums, photographs and awards, and the accumulated evidence of a life being lived importantly. His shelves held legal documents, 3 books he had actually read, and a small carved stone his mother had given him the year before she died, that he had never been able to justify professionally and had stopped trying to. He packed the stone first. Before he touched anything else, he opened his banking application. He had not looked at it since the morning of the elevator 3 days. In a warehouse with no phone had made that impossible, and some part of him had understood that this was not entirely an accident. The screen loaded. He looked at the numbers for a long time without moving. The primary accounts, suspended, pending restructure review. The family trust access, revoked. The independent holdings, transferred, clean title, reviewed and signed. He had done that one himself, so at least it landed where he intended. What remained after all of it was a number that would have seemed like wealth to a different kind of man, and felt, to him, like the specific silence of a room after furniture has been removed. He understood now the full architecture of what Seo-yeon had built in the 40 minutes while he was driving through the rain, remembering a warehouse. She had not just ended the engagement. She had performed a precise financial surgery that left him alive and unrecognizable at the same time. He set the phone down on the empty desk. He looked at the harbor. Then he picked up the carved stone and put it in the box, because it was the only thing in the room that had never belonged to the Empire, and it was the only thing he was certain standing here in the wreckage of the morning he used to be, still belonged to him. The documents would be handled by attorneys. The books he left purchased on the company account, they could stay with the company. He stood at the window for a while, looking at Seattle from 40 floors up, the harbor gray and patient below, the city going about its Tuesday morning with complete indifference to the fact that he was leaving. He had received 14 messages since 6 a.m., 2 from board members, 1 from his father's attorney with a settlement figure. He looked at the number, felt nothing, and archived it. 3 from journalists, 1 from Seoyeon's family's PR representative, deleted unread. The rest from people who had worked for him for years and were now uncertain what that meant. He wrote back to those, not with reassurances he couldn't make, but with acknowledgement that their uncertainty was reasonable, their work had been real, and he was sorry for the abruptness. His assistant knocked at 8:15. She stood in the doorway with the composure of a woman who had managed his schedule and his silences for 3 years, and had decided this morning still fell within her responsibilities. "Do you need anything?" she asked. "No, thank you, Jiyeon, for everything." She looked at him with an expression he hadn't seen on her face before, not sympathy exactly, and not pity, something more careful than either. "The press is framing you as the victim," she said. "The ambush angle. They're saying you were set up. I'm aware. Are you going to correct the record?" He looked at the harbor one more time at the gray water and the south pier he still couldn't see from here, but knew the location of now, the way you know the location of things that have become, without announcement, the place your compass points. "Eventually," he said, "when I have something worth saying." He picked up the box. He walked to the elevator. He pressed the lobby button, the same motion as 5 days ago, but different in every way that mattered, and rode down through 40 floors of an empire he was exiting and felt, with each floor that passed, something he had not prepared himself for. Not relief, not grief, a clean, specific readiness. The feeling of a man who has set down something very heavy and discovered, in the setting down, that his hands still work. The lobby opened onto a gray Tuesday morning. He walked out into it. 2 weeks later, the Hanjin-Won merger was a footnote. The trade publications ran it for 3 days. Won Air triggers morality clause, merger collapses, engagement dissolved before the news cycle moved on, as it always does, to the next man brought down by the architecture of his own choices. Seoyeon released a statement. It contained the phrase, "Preserve our family's dignity," twice. She had already been photographed at a charity dinner in Hong Kong by the time Jae-won read it, looking like a woman who had never encountered inconvenience. He didn't blame her. He understood her. He had learned, in the past 2 weeks, that those were not the same thing. He sat on a wooden crate on the South Pier in a gray sweater that had cost $40, watching the water. His accounts were being restructured by attorneys chosen for competence rather than connection. The Won family board had accepted his resignation with the stunned formality of men whose model of the world had just produced an error they couldn't categorize. He felt, unexpectedly, light. Demetra's footsteps reached him before she spoke, deliberate, unhurried, already familiar. She sat on the crate beside him without preamble. 6 inches of cold November air between them. He held out the manila folder. She opened it, turned each page with the careful attention of someone who has never skimmed a legal document. She went still on the last page. "These are your personal shipping shares," she said. 73% of my independent holdings, everything held outside the family trust. Clean title, reviewed by my own attorney, not my father's. This makes me the most powerful individual shareholder in the industry you just walked away from. Yes, I don't need it. "I know," he said. "That is precisely why it belongs to you." He looked at the water. "You spent 8 years building the kind of precision that could dismantle me from the inside without leaving fingerprints. That capability doesn't retire because one war ends. It deserves a theater worthy of it." He paused. "This is a transfer, not a payment. I need you to understand the difference." The harbor moved beneath them, cold and indifferent to what was happening on its edge. She was quiet for a long time. "You're not the person I built this for," she said finally. "I know. The person you built it for would have denied them on floor 90 and taken the settlement." Behind them, the door opened and the girls came out, school uniforms. Lily with her rabbit, Mara with her notebook, moving past the adults to the pier railing, returning to the water the way children return to the thing they were raised beside. Demetra watched them. Something in her face went quiet, the expression of a person looking at what they built entirely alone, finding it good, and understanding that the aloneness is no longer permanent. She slid the folder into her bag and stood. "The girls want the aquarium tomorrow," she said. "It opens at 9. 1 minute late and the doors stay locked." He looked up at her. "I'll be there at 8, he said. She held his gaze one moment, deciding, then called the girls inside. He remained on the crate as they went. loud and warm against the cold quiet of the harbor afternoon. The water moved. The light went. He had lost a kingdom and was sitting in its absence. And the cold on his face felt, for the first time in a decade, like honesty. He was there at 8. The parking lot held 3 cars and a maintenance truck. The aquarium was still closed. The morning was Seattle gray, the kind that suggests the sun exists somewhere above the clouds but has decided not to confirm it. Jae-won sat on the front steps with a coffee and waited, and did not check his phone, because nothing on it mattered more than what was coming down the street. They came in their orbit, Dimitra, in a long slate coat, thermos in hand, the girls moving around her with the unconscious arrangement of children who know exactly where their gravity is. Lily saw him first, and broke into a run decisively, with no concern for whether it was the correct decision. He stood up. She stopped 2 feet from him, and looked up with her mother's directness in his own eyes, a combination that remained, 2 weeks in, quietly extraordinary. "You're early," she said. "I said I'd be here at 8. But you're early. I didn't want to risk being late." She weighed the answer with the seriousness she brought to important information. Then she nodded once, and went to read the aquarium's posted operating hours. Mara stopped beside him without greeting. She opened her notebook and held it out. The same 4 figures, but rendered with more care, more patience. The gray suit on the tallest drawn carefully, and at the base of each figure, something the first drawing hadn't contained, small lines reaching downward. Roots. He looked at it for a long time without speaking. "Can I keep this?" he asked. "It's not finished yet," she said. She closed the notebook and walked to join her sister. Dimitra stopped beside him. They stood in the gray morning without speaking, 2 people who had arrived at this particular Tuesday through entirely different routes and found themselves, improbably, at the same door. She held out the thermos. He took it. Their fingers did not touch, and that did not matter, because the thermos contained more than tea. It contained the grammar of a woman who does not offer things carelessly. What the offer said was simple and enormous. "You may be here. There is a practice in Japanese art called kintsugi, the repair of broken things with gold. Not to disguise the fracture, but to honor it. To say, this broke, and the breaking is part of what it is now. The repair is not erasure. It is proof that the thing was worth mending." Jae-won did not have his kingdom. He had a $40 sweater and a thermos of tea and 2 daughters who had not yet called him anything but the man who stays a title he had not been granted, but was learning, one early morning at a time, to deserve. If this world held you the slow burns, the earned trust, the love assembled from wreckage, one careful piece at a time, then you already belong in Velvet Noir. Subscribe and stay inside the dark with us. There are always more stories here. There always will be. Before we leave this world, I want to ask you one question, and I want you to sit with it. When Jae-won pressed that lobby button and chose his daughters over his dynasty, was that the moment he became a different man? Or was it simply the first moment he finally stopped performing the wrong one? Leave your answer below. We'll be here.